I'd like to call to order the closed session of the Albany City Council meeting for October 2nd. The council will convene in council chambers and adjourn to closed session to discuss the following: labor negotiation pursuant to Government Code Section 59457.6. The City of Albany with the Albany Firefighters Association. Seeing no one for public comment, we will adjourn to closed session.
How are you? Good, thanks.
Western CD.
Call to order the Albany City Council meeting for October 2nd, 2017. Please join Councilmember Nason in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Barnes?
Here.
Councilmember Moss?
Present.
Councilmember Nason?
Here.
Vice Mayor Pilch?
Here.
Mayor McQuaid?
Here. On behalf of the City of Albany, I want to express our condolences to all those in Las Vegas who are suffering tonight. We grieve with you on the loss of your family and friends. To the hundreds who are injured, we send hope that your healing journey goes smoothly. We share your pride in your police, first responders, and concertgoers who bravely responded so quickly in saving the lives of many. We thank the doctors, nurses, and staff in your hospitals for their care and professionalism. We will adjourn our meeting this evening in memory of those who lost their lives and were injured in Las Vegas. As mayor, I urge the Albany community to honor these latest victims of gun violence by recommitting to create a safe and peaceful community globally, nationally, and locally. Let us not only send our sympathy, but let us take action, be it through blood or monetary donations, participating in the political process, supporting mental health services or firearms regulations. Let us come together as a community to continue the fight against hate and terror in our lives. Let us support one another, seeking recognition and understanding of our silent pain and fear. Let us stand as a community and say no more, and let us take action to ensure these are not hollow words. In honor of October being National Chiropractic Month, we have a proclamation. Dr. Prince, could you come up to the podium, please?
City of Albany proclamation in honor of October 2017 as National Chiropractic Health Month. Whereas, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as many as 1 in 4 patients who receive prescription opioids long-term for non-cancer pain in primary care settings struggles with addiction. And whereas every day, more than 1,000 people are treated in the ER for misusing prescription opioids, and deaths involving opioids have quadrupled since 1999. And whereas the spread of opioid abuse has prompted the White House to announce it will designate the opioid crisis a national emergency, and whereas because of this epidemic, the need for non-invasive, non-drug approaches to pain management for common musculoskeletal conditions such as back pain has increased throughout the world, and particularly in the United States. And whereas the American College of Physicians, ACP, in 2017 released updated low back pain treatment guidelines that promote the use of non-invasive, non-drug approaches as a first line of defense against back pain before the use of pain medications and surgery. And whereas chiropractors focus on the whole person with the non-invasive, non-drug approach to health care and pain management, and whereas there is a growing research validating the effectiveness of chiropractic services, spinal manipulation in particular, for the treatment of low back pain, leading many respected healthcare organizations such as the ACP to include chiropractic spinal manipulation in their guidelines for physicians. And whereas National Chiropractic Health Month 2017 serves as a reminder that non-invasive, non-drug treatments for low back pain, such as chiropractic services, spinal manipulation, may lessen or eliminate the need for riskier, potentially addictive treatments such as prescription opioid pain medications, and should be thoroughly exhausted whenever possible before initiating over-the-counter and prescription opioid therapy. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Albany officially joins with the American Chiropractic Association, the ACA, in recognizing the month of October 2017 as National Chiropractic Health Month. Ask your doctor if chiropractic services are right for you. So, congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor McQuaid. Thank you to the council and the City of Albany. It has been my honor to be a chiropractor serving the citizens of Albany and Alameda County and the surrounding communities for the past 28 years. In practice for 31 years. And the words spoken today by Mr. Moss certainly ring true, and we need more drugless solutions to healthcare problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Report on action taken in closed session. Council gave staff direction on how to proceed on the closed session item. Consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item?
5, 5, 6, and 8.
Okay.
5, 5, 6, and 5, 8.
Any others? Is there any member of the public who wishes to pull an item? Okay, would you?
Okay. One moment. I had given some minor suggestions for changes. I thought I had given them to staff, and it turns out the email was unsent in my email box. So I'll attempt to do this now. And just before the meeting, I passed this by staff. On page 3 of the new parking regulations, it lists 2-family dwellings. There's 3 categories. There's single-family homes, 2-family dwellings, and then multifamily. And since we're striking the word duplexes from the multifamily, I thought we could just move it to the 2-family as to just point out that that's a usual synonym for 2-family dwellings, but not a big deal.
Yeah, we can include that as part of the definition.
Great, thank you. And then on page 8, I'd spoken previously about the sentence that began with sufficient bicycle storage space, including outdoor bicycle racks, et cetera, et cetera. I reread it and I found it confusing. I don't know how to change it because I think it's mixing a number of things together. But I think at this point, I just want to make that point that I think that in future revisions we can tighten up this language, but I don't think we need to do that now. And finally, on page 16, I did suggest at the last meeting that not only should bicycle parking facilities be provided in a convenient and well-lit area, but I suggested that we add something like this, and then I gave staff this language. Unprotected bicycle parking should be located in an area of high pedestrian foot traffic so as to discourage theft. That's quite often where bicycles get stolen, is where they're locked in a nice area, convenient area, but they're out of the way, out of sight of people walking by, and that's where a lot of theft occurs. And those were my suggestions, if the council is okay with that, for item 5.5.
I'm fine with that last one, but I'm not sure where you would put it.
I have it under letter A. That was where I included it. under bicycle parking, so C2, and then lowercase a,
Oh, I see. Okay,
at the top of page 16.
thank you. Could you also go over the changes that you made late this afternoon?
Yes. And so for the council's benefit, there is a revised copy of the draft on the dais for you.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. Has anyone in the audience seen this revised copy?
We just put it out before the meeting tonight. I don't think I put one back there. I put none, yeah.
Clay, do you want?
So I'm happy to go over those changes. They're largely contained, let me give you a page reference. So beginning on the bottom of page 20, under two-family dwellings, we originally had may, it was shall, and what was provided to you as part of the packet. It's now been restored back to may. And then on page 21, effectively we did the same thing where I erred in changing the wrong mays and shalls per the last council meeting. So under bullets 4 for multifamily, number 5 residential mixed-use development, 6 affordable dwelling unit, and 7 existing residential mixed use. We have restored Planning and Zoning Commission may by conditional use permit reduce off-street parking requirements contained in section 2028-030A, and reducing on-site parking requirements the commission shall, and then we've listed the specific considerations for them to review when evaluating parking reductions.
Great, thank you. And I think those were my changes last time, and I'm sorry that I wasn't more clear on how to do that. I didn't notice there were 2 of each. So thank you for fixing them. Okay, are there any more other council comments on this parking ordinance? If not, I will ask for public comment on this.
Regarding those changes, did you include 2840 A3? Did I understand you that correctly?
Reference to two-family dwelling?
Should be 3, 4, and 5, right? Did you say 3? I meant.
Yeah, 2028-040, so A, number 3, two-family dwelling. The Planning Commission may by conditional use permit.
It's bottom of page 20.
Bottom of page 20.
I see the. Okay, I see the change. All right, that's good. The council maybe want to ask the city attorney whether this, since this is ultimately a substantive change, whether this is going to necessitate a third second reading or a second reading. But don't ask it on my time. So I wanted to, with a little time left, I sent an email. I wanted to comment. I probably won't get to everything I include in the email. It's interesting to look at the net of this. The Measure D was often misdescribed by staff, by council members, as requiring 2 parking spaces per unit. It actually included provisions that those could be reduced to 1.5 parking spaces per unit if there was sufficient on-street parking. Well, with the new plan, we're going to require 1 parking space regardless of whether there's sufficient on-street parking. So I think that sort of encapsulates the change here with regards to high density and multifamily. And the other thing is over the years, to run up to this, I listened to staff blather on ad nauseum about the criticism of Measure D and that it was a one-size-fits-all. I mean, it's 2 units, whether it's a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment or a 4-bedroom unit. We have the exact same model here. It was surprising. But I think the real challenging thing, the real concern here has to be the provisions that have now been adjusted. That the shall has been returned to may. I don't think that this language allows the Planning and Zoning Commission to reduce the parking requirements from 1 unit to, I guess, 0. I don't understand what a negative, maybe negative parking requirements, you take on-street parking and make parklets, but apparently it's to 0. There are no standards, there are no criteria, there are no findings to be made. I actually think this is I write regulations at work, and we write regulations under the Administrative Procedure Act. Under the Administrative Procedure Act, this wouldn't pass muster. I think there's legal concerns that this is so vague, it basically doesn't prevent abuse of discretion on the part of the commission. I had some other comments. I think it is telling that R1 housing was I think they took up a little of my time, that R1 housing was completely omitted from this. Right? That the council and the commission showed exquisite sensitivity when it came to the concerns about people living in R1.
Clay, you need to wrap up.
Okay, I think 3 minutes is ridiculous. I listened to you guys talk and make no sense for 5 minutes. I'm through, thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Just to wrap this one up, I do appreciate the comments of Mr. Larson, and we did, I believe, give direction last meeting that we wanted Planning and Zoning Commission at some point to revisit the R1 guidelines. So that will. We did give that direction last time. I also appreciate his one-size-fits-all comments. I think that would be another good thing for Planning and Zoning to revisit is, do we want 1 space per studio unit and 2 spaces per 2-bedroom unit? That might be a refinement to go to. But I think that since we've been saddled with this voter-driven initiative for so long, we're just now getting back on our feet and figuring out how to do this. So I think we can just move this along and continue to make this better, make refinements as we go. Those were my comments on 5.5. 5.6 is proclamation in honor of Freedom from Workplace Bullies Week. I appreciate that we've put this on the agenda. We were asked to put this on the agenda. I just want to say that this is an important item for me. I've been the victim of workplace bullies, and I've seen friends and family be the victim of workplace bullies, and I'm glad that this issue, that people are coming together to address this issue. And then finally, item 5.8, I find it sad that that we have to put something on the consent calendar to allow the mayor to use city facilities to host the Girl Scouts. When this came up for discussion, I voted no, that we do not have to have this level of scrutiny on the use of city facilities by council members, and I still feel it's ridiculous, and this might spur me to bring back to council another version of this so that we don't have to vote on whether the mayor can host the Girl Scouts in city council on city property. That's all. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to,
May I return to 5.5? There's several issues I would like to
Sorry about that.
discuss. There's too many things left on the table. There's sort of this idea that this will eventually go back to P&Z, but in this process, and this is our second reading, so it would not go back to P&Z. I mean, we're writing this into our ordinance.
That's correct.
Then P&Z would have to revisit it maybe way down the road. There's some issues about the legality of this. I wouldn't mind waiting to sort of make sure we're firm about these. And there's also been enough changes. I would appreciate getting all the changes in there and making sure it's good to go as far as proofreading goes. In other words, there's proofreading and policy going on here at the same time, and it kind of messes with my brain. So I guess I should ask our attorney, can we bring this back and not approve it until we've had a chance to look at the final clean version of it?
Just first respond to the point that Mr. Larson raised. I don't think there's a legal problem with the city moving forward to approve it. If you choose to do so, under the city charter, you're allowed to make substantive revisions between first and second reading, as long as the general purpose and scope of the ordinance is not changed. And I would view the changes being discussed as not not violating that rule. Having said that, it's certainly up to the council's discretion to continue the matter if you feel it requires further scrutiny.
Well, it's up to the rest of you. I'd be more comfortable if we could get a completely clean copy of it and review it one more time, but
I feel the same.
Okay. And I would agree with that.
So I will move the consent calendar with removing item 5.5. So I'll move the rest of the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Councilmember Barnes?
yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Nason?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pilch?
Yes.
Mayor McQuaid?
Yes, and the motion carries.
And Michael, would you like to move something on 5.5 then?
Do we need a motion?
Continue.
Clear consensus to continue it to a future meeting, then I don't know that you need a formal motion. If the council feels the need to discuss that, then you might want to make a motion.
I'm fine with bringing it back, but I do think this ordinance is important. It will open the door for potentially developers to consider Albany as a more viable place to build housing. So I do think it's important to pass this sooner than later, but if we delay it for a meeting or two, I think that should be okay as long as it's no longer than that.
Okay. That seems to be the sense, so we'll expect to see it the next meeting. Okay, good of the city. Good of the city is a time for persons desiring to address the city council on an item that is not on the agenda. Please note city policy limits each speaker to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. How many speakers do we have? 4. 4? Okay, come on up.
The speaker is requesting that she's reading someone else's letter. If she can have a separate 3-minute for the speaker. It's just 1 3-minute, right?
You know, there's only 3 or 4 people speaking. I think we'll go with that tonight. I'm going to allow her 3 minutes to read a letter, and I'm going to allow her 3 minutes to make her own personal statement.
Good evening. So I was hoping that the police chief would be here as well, but that's okay. We've been here before, and the facts keep continuing to surface with nothing being done really to rectify the quote-unquote racism issue in Albany. Mayor Quaid, I heard you know, with reason, mention about Las Vegas, but there wasn't any response in writing or via social media about the Pierce Street incident. Hate crimes need to be reported. Even that incident itself, whatever it's classified as, no report came up on the crime reports app for the City of Albany Police Department. The community needs to know when an incident occurs, where, and if the investigation is active, pending, closed, along with if it was referred to the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. The perpetrating buffoons that did this heinous crime should not go unpunished. Restorative justice cannot stop hate as the damage has already been done. This is why the city needs to amend the police hate crime criteria, as it is a common fact that if the investigating officer does not find any incident a hate crime, it is not reported as one. You also need to adopt stricter hate crime policy that will be enforced. This way, if anyone thinks to try any tomfoolery incident of the same nature, they will have no choice but to think before they do it. Also, finding someone behind usually deters unwarranted behavior as well. There are about 9 groups that are in Albany that tackle Albany issues/concerns, many of them overlapping. Social media pages, the police blotter Albany Patch, and Nextdoor do not communicate on a regular basis unless one individual happens to know a contact in every single group. This needs to be addressed because communication and technology go hand in hand. If we are a sanctuary city, the foundation is cracking right now, and within time, the whole thing will just collapse. Start bridging the gap now. Why isn't there some type of algorithm to connect the dots? Make a conscious effort to address things because the same distrust that is occurring with Albany Unified School District is reflecting upon the city council within the city council. My personal opinion is that the groups within Albany are divided and not united, primarily because of lack of communication. Albany wants to be the first in academics, but be the first in humanity for a change. Protests and signs are a thing of the past. Start asking yourself, do you really want change? And are you going to concern yourself with action or reaction? And then my second one is from Anne Zolgarfi. I'm probably mispronouncing it, sorry, Anne. She says, "Dear council members, given the recent hate graffiti on the Albany Pathway and on Pierce Street, I believe it is time for Albany City Council to adopt a clear resolution or policy that stipulates how hate incidences and hate crimes are documented and tracked by the city and the Albany Police Department. We need to know how hate incidences and hate crimes will be tracked and reported to Albany." According to the LA Times, police across California said that they developed strategies for dealing with hate incidences long before Trump's election, something they said was a necessity in the diverse communities they serve. What has the City Council and Albany Police Department done, and how have they communicated this to our community? The second thing she has is, how is the City Council and Albany Police Department planning on responding to Trump's lifting of restrictions on surplus military equipment for local police departments? In the past, there were community concerns that armored vehicles and other military gear escalates rather than de-escalates confrontations. How will our city respond? And then she says, thank you, and Zol Fagari. You guys don't have to respond necessarily on mine. I understand, because it's probably a lot for you, but if you do, that's okay. I have my children here. They're my heart and soul, and I just couldn't imagine any of that happening in our place, let alone to somebody else. So again, it's already serious enough outside in the world, but if I can't even allow my daughter to walk or ride her scooter to the Albany Library because I'm afraid that something is going to happen, then it starts making you wonder, what is anybody else, doing? What are we going to do? And if nothing's done, then people are just going to leave like they have been. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Peter Goodman. I'm chair of the Albany Arts Committee. I wanted to remind everyone that our second annual Fall into Haiku program is taking place from approximately Thanksgiving through New Year's. We're going to be decorating the sidewalks of Albany, particularly around Solano and San Pablo, with original haiku poetry written by the citizens of Albany or the students of Albany or anyone who works in Albany. And we're looking for submissions. We have a submission deadline of October 15th. We're encouraging everyone in the city to put their writing caps on and come up with 17 more or less syllables to talk about the holiday, how you're feeling about the season, anything you notice, particular moments in time, something like that. It's really just about a celebration of nature, celebration of our life, celebration of our community. And it's a total community effort. It was very successful, very well received last year. We hope it'll be similar success this year, but it really demands everyone's participation. So if people are watching at home, please go on the city website. The website is kind of long. It is http://www.albany.ca.org/art-in-public-into-haiku. I mention that because it's really hard to find it if you just go on the city website. And the easiest way to find it is actually just to Google Fall into Haiku Albany. You'll probably come across the submissions page. So I encourage everyone to participate. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if that was a URL or a haiku.
I think that was good. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Ann Miley, and I live in Albany. And I'm here in response to Peggy's editorial in the Albany Journal and other papers, as I understand it. I was here the last time when we were going through the agonizing process of removing people from the bulb, and I haven't been back since. But after reading that editorial, I felt like I wanted to come back and revisit a little bit. I appreciate the time that was put into, that all of you put into city government. I have family members who are involved in it. I know the time that it takes, and I appreciate the article. But I do think that it was a little bit self-congratulatory in terms of listing the number of services that had been provided by Albany, most of which, frankly, were pretty unsuccessful. The Gilman Street underpass settlement and the rest of the things mentioned by Jesse Arakeen in that Channel 2 interview certainly indicates that. What I would like to hear from this organization, this City Council or any other source, is what Albany is doing to contribute to homelessness and affordable housing. When the people were forced off the bulb, that was not being spoken of as a major consideration. There was not a Channel 2, two-part series on it, but there is now. It was very foreseeable that those people would end up in a homeless situation somewhere else, and now they are. So Jesse Arakeen mentioned something about there being a pop-up navigation center that the city of Albany might contribute to or should contribute to. And since we've caused, I believe, and I think it's pretty clear, problems in other cities by what we did on the bulb, which was a really rough justice. It wasn't justice at all. It seems like it's time for the citizens of Albany to know what we are doing to contribute to this. Affordable housing, we're no longer fighting the fact that we have to be brought up to date in federal court. We've moved along. That's good. We're, now not 10 years behind. But what are we contributing to? How's affordable housing moving forward in Albany? El Cerrito's making great strides. Albany's doing, I don't know what. Berkeley's doing something on the other side. So if we could be brought up to date on that. The parking thing that you mentioned tonight is a help in that direction. The new zoning for accessory buildings is a help in that direction. But, what are we doing to actually move it forward? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alan Maris, Albany citizen. I'm going to follow up a little bit on what a previous speaker said as well. First of all, I just want to say a couple of things about Las Vegas. Sandy Hook, Orlando, and Las Vegas. That's it. Think about it. We've got to do something about it. I mean, Sandy Hook was bad enough, and it's incredible. I'd also like, on a different subject, like to say we had a very successful open house for the new Albany Community Resource Center, which is a part of our addressing the needs of Albany's less fortunate people who are looking for homes, food, clothing. It's a good start, and thank you for supporting it. Going back to July 31st, we had an affordable housing workshop, which I think is a good start. One of the options was to spend the money in Berkeley. Another option, which was not dealt with very much, was to spend the money that's provided by Measure A1 bond fund from Alameda County. It was indicated that the city of Albany might look into that in developing housing in Albany. I hope you take a really serious look at that in developing housing in Albany, so the mayor of Berkeley doesn't say Albany's doing nothing. We are doing some things, and I think the mayor pointed that out very well in the editorial recently. However, I think we could do more, and I think instead of sending our homeless people to adjacent cities, that we provide the housing for affordable housing for a wide range of people. This allows us to meet our housing element for the very low income people, which we have addressed a little bit, but I think we could do a lot more. I really would encourage you to jump on this idea of developing affordable housing for a full range of people without housing, from the homeless to the school teacher who can't afford to live in Albany with the rent increases, our service people who are seeing excessive rents. We can provide more affordable rents for all of our citizens. I think with the $2.5 million that's being provided by the county, we've got to come up with another $6 or $8 million to get those matching funds. I think we can look to maybe providing some city-owned property. We could also look at finding partners, either real estate partners.
Ellen, you need to wrap it up.
Yeah. What does that mean? Stop?
That means your time's up.
Thanks.
All right. Hi, good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'd like to say a few things on the behalf of the good of our city. I would like to say that our library is doing a great job. I go to the library pretty much every day. And I think one thing that would benefit our library for our city would to have a color printer. I think students doing reports for their school or colleges or professionals trying to do something, color printer would be great. Also, a software upgrade would be great on the computers. I try to donate an electric typewriter. They have no electric typewriter there for use for the public. And the one I have is in excellent condition and works fantastic. So I was going to donate it for other people to use. I use it all the time. So no electric typewriter because our library uses a vendor. So they can't even accept my donation because they have to use a certain vendor. But I know, I mean, I've been going to that library since I've been in high school, over 15 years ago, and it's got the same computers and the same printer. So I don't know if that vendor is doing anything. Also, school zones, it would be great for our city. Right now, we have no school zones. The slowest speed in our city is 25 miles an hour. So cars go 25, 30 around preschools and elementary schools, which is really fast. We don't have drop-off hours or loading or unloading hours for kids. So there's a lot of traffic in the morning. Also, Showers on Fridays in Albany is a really great resource for the community. Anybody can go there, and I want to thank all the volunteers for making homemade food and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. There's a lot of places, the Albany Laundry does free laundry for everybody, so they do all the towels and stuff. And also, there's that resource center on Marin and Talbot, I believe, for Albany that we were just talking about, the resource center, and it's great for everybody. And also, I know there's a lot going on, but the police department and the fire department, I know we're also covering for Kensington as well. And I know we say police and fire, but ambulance is a whole nother department that gets looked over. And ambulance is really a big thing, and it's part of the fire department. But, you know, we're doing 2 cities, and it's just, they're doing a lot. So I want to just, you know, there's a lot going on in the world. You know, I know certain police officers, you know, have different personalities, but a lot of the police and fire officers, they do a wonderful job. They're keeping the city safe. And so I'd like the school zones to be on a future agenda, if possible, please, so we can further discuss getting our city school zones in our municipal code book. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Okay, that moves us to number 7, council member reports on meetings attended, announcements of future meetings. Anyone want to start, Pete?
Sure. Since last we met, I attended the East Bay Community Energy Board meeting. I filled in for Vice Mayor Pilch, who wasn't able to attend that night. It was a fairly light agenda. The main issue was deciding on the billing data management company. At the last moment, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers raised objections to the choice that a committee had come up with that included Nick, and so it was re-agendized to a future meeting. The Waste Management Authority and Energy Council met last Wednesday, excuse me, and there were some minor changes in parliamentarian rules of procedure, and then a closed session on employee evaluation of the ED and a recommendation for a modest compensation. The last thing I'd mention was I attended a Spur presentation on the 27th, and on the state's plan to expand and modernize our rail system, bullet trains, expanding railroads to many, many places. If it's fully funded, it looks like it'll be great, and completion would be, if I hit 92, I'll get to watch it. So, my meetings.
Great. Anybody else?
Sure. I guess we've swapped meetings because I filled in for Councilmember Moss at the ACTC, the Alameda County Transportation Commission, this past Thursday. There were a number of updates. I meant to bring the paper flyers that were passed out there for the council, but AlamidaACTC.org is the website, and I encourage you to go there to get the latest updates. There was a director's report, and then the report of the Independent Watchdog Committee that looks over the expenditures of the Measure B and Measure BB funds. And finally, importantly, as many of you probably know, it's likely we're going to have a regional measure 3 coming up in the ballot in a year or so, or a little over a year, which will be a increase of bridge tolls to fund transportation projects. In the first go-round of the way the money was, of the calculation for how the money was going to be given out to the various counties, Alameda County really fell was way behind in the amount of money that they were going to receive. Through lobbying, that was corrected, and Alameda County is now going to receive its fair share, we believe, of that money should the measure go to the ballot and pass. And finally, there's a state measure, SB 595, that needs to pass, which is the authorizing measure, state measure, that will allow regional measure 3 to be allowed to go to the ballot. And I figured that all out for myself. I'm kind of proud of that. It's a little bit of legislative mumble jumble there. And I think, and then there was a report on the ACTC's travel demand management, otherwise known as transit demand management or transit demand management, or the first word is often interchanged with other words. But what ACTC is doing to promote other modes of transit, bicycling, walking, and taking public transit. And I think that's about it for that meeting.
Okay, Rochelle?
I have not had meetings that I can think of the last 2 weeks, just the Community Resource Center open house, which was very encouraging. But I did want to mention some upcoming meetings. The BCDC will be considering the Albany Beach project on the 5th. The JPA will be meeting on October 18th, I believe, and the Alta Bates Regional Task Force, the task force on the closure of our community hospital, will be on the 11th. And if people are interested in those subjects, we'd welcome hearing from you.
And the BCDC meeting, I believe, is at an unfortunate time in the middle of the day, but the Albany Beach item, I believe, is the last on the agenda, so it might be in the afternoon.
Do you have anything? I attended several of the local week events, and with other council members, the opening of the Resource Center, met with the city manager and Supervisor Carson and his staff. I attended a League of California Cities workshop on implicit bias and procedural justice. And then there's other events on the agenda that were earlier. But I want to give a shout out to the Recreation and Community Services staff under the leadership of Shelley Putzer for another successful local week. And I also want to be the first one to say that there's only one more year until Dinner with Albany. City manager report?
Yes, as we have had a few key positions leave the city. We have 2 new hires that started a week ago today, and we have a CIP manager who started, which in our Public Works Department, we've been looking long and hard and found someone that will fill that position nicely. You'll have an opportunity to meet him at an upcoming meeting. And also our Human Resources Director also started on the 25th, and you'll have an opportunity to meet her as well.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about pancakes?
Oh, yes. Oh, I thought you were going to read it.
I thought you were.
Yes, we do have, the fire department does have our pancake breakfast on Saturday. I must have misread your email, Mayor. I apologize for that. Would you like to read it since I don't have it in front of me?
Neither do I, but I can just improvise a little bit. And maybe Lance, if I get lost, you can jump in. Saturday the 14th from 8 to noon, pancake breakfast. They make the best pancakes, bacon, sausage, juice, coffee, and there's lots of vendors there with safety items to look at, to buy, whatever. It's a really worthwhile thing. The money raised goes to the Burn Foundation. So it's a great thing to come and be part of that on the 14th. Okay. Moving down to new business. 11-1, resolution 2017-76, CIP project number 21,000, fiscal year 2016-2020, annual street rehabilitation project amendment to include a street segment to be funded by the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017, SB 1. May we have a staff report, please?
Sure thing. All right, good evening. So we have two items for you tonight. First, we're looking to make an amendment to the both the scope and budget of the annual pavement project. And this will be the 2017-18 budget of that project in the CIP, and then we're also asking to go out to bid on a very narrow project, the Avalon project, which is described in the staff report, and we'll go over here in a little bit. And this report and the action tonight is very narrowly crafted to meet the requirements of SB1, and this is the recently adopted or assigned Road Repair Accountability Act of 2017, and it provides a number of funding mechanisms for California roads, investing in infrastructure and so forth. And so there's some money available to us, and so this is very narrowly crafted to meet those requirements. So first, I'm going to go over a little bit of the details around the SB1, and then talk about how we came up with our project recommendation. So SB1 establishes a new funding source, and it's primarily driven by increases in fuel taxes as well as vehicle registration fees. And this is important that it's different than the money we get from the highway users tax account. So in our budget, we have the gas tax fund. This will be in addition to that, and it'll be a separate fund, and we're going to have to track that separately. And this money flows through a newly established account that's called the Road Maintenance and Repair account. And so all the money is going to go through that, and I have some diagrams that sort of map this out that, I don't know where, oh, there we go. Map that out. Some of the differences of this funding versus the other gas tax money that we get is that it's tied to inflation, so that as our funding level will keep up with construction costs, so we can keep doing the same amount of work every year, which is good. And then there's a set of accountability requirements, which is driving the action tonight, and I'll get into that in a second. In some of the guidance documents, they had these figures that I think do a good job in mapping out the type of infrastructure or the type of funding. The blue boxes on the top show the different funding sources. The transportation improvement fees are the vehicle taxes, the annual vehicle user fee taxes. And then the gas taxes, that all filters through a number of accounts. The one we're focused on is the green arrow, the RMRA. And that gets further divided into a number of different sort of initiatives. And what we're interested in is the bottom right-hand corner, which is money parsed out to cities based on population. We also have some opportunity in the active transportation program and local planning grants to apply for additional funding. Aleda's looking at that, and that's sort of on a separate pathway. So we have that's separate than what we're doing tonight, but there's more in there for us. So what do we get? This first year of the program, we're expecting to get about $106,000 in additional funding. And then in 2017 and 18, we will get we're getting a full allocation. So some of the details behind this, the gas tax piece of this goes into effect in November, and then the vehicle registration fees go into effect in January. There's a component that goes into effect of the vehicle registration fees go into effect in 2020. But my sense is the 18-19 amount represents our sort of full allotment that will be tied to inflation. So the use of this money is really focused. It's really focused on getting at the deferred maintenance, the deferred pavement, critical safety improvements. They have some provisions in it to allow you to use the money on different things, but they have some requirements that you have like an average PCI of 80. So we have some work to do before we get to that level. And they also have a number of accountability measures that, again, we're focusing on tonight. Once the program's up and running, on an annual basis, we'll be required at the beginning of the fiscal year to submit a project list that is part of an adopted budget. So it'll list the types of projects. It has very specific requirements, and the list is attached to the staff report. It talks perfectly reasonable, information about the projects. What project are you doing? What are you doing? Where is it located? What's your schedule? And then what's the usable life of the improvement you're proposing to do? So that's due in the beginning of the fiscal year, and then every October there's a report that's due that shows how you use the money. So you put the report in at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then at the end of the fiscal year you or in October after the fiscal year you submit a report detailing exactly what you're doing. This first year is different because we're already into our fiscal year, and we have a deadline of October 16th to submit our paperwork for this year's funding. And so that's what we're doing today, is they allow us an opportunity to get it in part of an adopted budget, and that's the action that we're taking care of right now. Now on the project selection, we tried to be very strategic about this. We had a number of criteria that we're looking for. We wanted to find a project that had the appropriate scale. We wanted to do an improvement that fit the amount of money that we're expecting to get from this new funding source, about $106,000. We wanted to make sure it was coordinated with other projects, particularly sewer, so that we're not digging up streets again, so we get the full value. We also wanted to tackle a street that had a low PCI.
Can we, for the sake of the public, can you explain that acronym to us, please? PCI?
It's a pavement condition index. So it's a measure of how, let's say, from I think 0 to 100, how good your pavement is, with 100 being the best and 0 being the worst. So we wanted, and there's a real important number around 50 in the program we use to project PCI. If you have a PCI of above 50, you have a range of treatment measures that are more preventative maintenance. If you're below 50, your range of measures are essentially reconstruction. So it's a much more costly and intensive project. So we wanted to pick one that was on the lower end of the scale, because we do have a number of streets that need some attention. And then we wanted to take a constructability review. Since we did have a limited amount of money for this, we wanted to find a project that we understood all the issues, and we weren't getting into something that would potentially cost us significant more, things like curb ramps and things of that sort, or other drainage issues. So we think the project we selected fits that bill. We did survey about 3 streets to come up with this, and we again identified it. They were all about the $90,000 to $110,000 range. We went out and surveyed. We had an engineer go out and survey each one of them, and we recommended doing the Evelyn between Garfield and Portland. It's a street that does need some attention. It recently had a sewer project done on it, so it's deserving. So with that, I'd open it to questions.
Any questions? I just have one sort of general question. There seems to be some talk about this legislation getting into the courts.
Yes.
Is there concern that if we spend money, it's viewed as unconstitutional or whatever, that we'll have to give the money back?
So I think we would, my sense is we would only go so far until we understood that we had the money. I think that we could do things of initiate the design and take it to the point where before we actually initiate a construction contract, to figure out really what's going on. Okay. That said, we are looking, we're looking and lining out our CIP project that will come forward. So it is a deserving street, so if we end up doing it, it's not like we're spending money on something that's not necessary. It's just more of a prioritization. Also, one sort of point here, going forward, as we do line out our CIP, we want to change the configuration to better match the reporting requirements for this. So I think we're going to be adding the detail in. I think one of the issues is our CIP shows sort of bulk dollar amounts that we're spending in specific years, and then we come back on an annual basis with the project sections, and that's not tied nicely to the reporting timelines for this. So we'll tighten that up.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
When do you expect construction to start on any of the pavement program?
So on this one, we could do this pretty quickly. We're looking probably at the beginning part of the year. As far as the overall project, we have slowed it down a little bit because staffing, and we've pushed up the sidewalk work. My sense is sort of the end of this year, early part of next year, we're going to be coming in with a CIP update that will have not only our current fiscal year projects lined out, but really the balance of the capital plan with streets, and so then we would go pretty quickly into design. So my sense is we would have a project this summer at the earliest.
So the current project, the Evelyn project, would be on a separate timeline.
So I think we would want to do it on a separate timeline, since looking at the reporting requirements, you report over the past fiscal year. So I think we would want to show at least the first year that we are completing the project we're saying that we're going to do. So
Okay.
if things lined up perfectly, we would do it all as one, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. Okay, understood. Thank you.
Go ahead.
You keep coming back to the reporting requirements, and this is a unique channel of money. Are those greater on, for these funds than they might be for other funds we receive?
This is new for the gas tax. The gas tax has none of this reporting requirement.
Okay. And does that add much to the overall cost in these projects? And are these funds sort of covering those reporting costs?
I'm not sure if it adds any cost. It adds some more administrative process to us in making sure that how we're structuring it mirrors up with the reports that we have to submit.
Okay. And will these funds cover all aspects of these projects, or are they going to be limited to just the straight asphalt, or we'll cover the planning parts of it?
So we're looking at this would be the total project cost that would include the design component as well as CM services and testing and so forth. So I'm looking at that would be sort of an all-encompassing project. So to the extent we have a pavement project that they were doing and sort of any of the costs associated with that we would fund out of this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Is there any public comment?
Just a question. I wanted to know if there was a second runner-up, if there were any projects that came close, and also if there were any that were below that 50 mark that just no way that this amount of money would work.
So it's when we looked at it, we first looked at price. We wanted to find projects within a price range. So someone that had a much, had the PCI, met the PCI criteria, but it was maybe a $200,000 project. We just eliminated because it didn't fit into our funding requirement. I think the other streets we were looking at was on Clay, and the other one I'm escaping right now. But we identified 3 that we walked.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council for final comments. Seeing none, I'll for a motion.
I will move this measure.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Nason?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pilch?
Yes.
Mayor McQuaid?
Yes, and the motion carries. Okay, 11-2, Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. May we have a staff report, please?
All right, thanks. Good evening, Mayor McQuaid, members of council. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of our local hazard mitigation planning process and where we are right now, and then if you'd like, we can dive in a little deeper on some of these slides. I imagine you may have some questions. I can always go back, and I actually have more slides that I'm going to show you right now. So the city is required to update our local hazard mitigation plan to be eligible for FEMA grant funding. A local hazard mitigation plan is a tool for addressing disasters before they happen, and the ultimate goal is to reduce the potential loss of life, property, and natural resources during and after a disaster. We see this as a necessary part of resilience and climate adaptation planning, and we also believe this conversation is particularly timely given recent events. It's important to note that this is a plan for mitigating hazards and that preparedness, response, and recovery aspects of emergency management are addressed in our emergency operations plan, which is a separate document. A little bit about our planning process. We began the planning process by discussing this at several sustainability committee meetings to gather community input, and then we conducted a survey to determine the community's level of concern for potential hazards as well as their understanding of emergency preparedness. We identified potential natural and human-caused hazards, assessed risks and vulnerabilities associated with those hazards, and developed long-term strategies for protecting people and property from future hazard events. Staff prepared a draft local hazard mitigation plan using guidance from ABAG, the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, and FEMA. And the plan you have today is still very much in draft form, and we look forward to incorporating council and community feedback into the plan before bringing it back to you for final adoption. So one of our first steps was to identify hazards. We considered a wide range of hazards. We're only required to assess natural disasters, but we decided to include some human-caused hazards as well, things that we thought were most likely to happen in Albany. We identified the 9 bolded hazards for further analysis based on previous events and also from community input from that survey. We also conducted a risk assessment. We determined the probability of occurrence of potential impact on people, property, and the economy for each hazard, and then ranked them based on the analysis. And I have another slide later on if you want to dive a little deeper into this piece. We have identified a short list of mitigation strategies for each of the hazards we identified, which you can find in the attached matrix. I'm not going to go through all of the strategies now, but I have slides later, and I can bring them up to discuss potential strategies after the presentation. And in terms of next steps, we are planning, after tonight's meeting, we'll continue to engage other city departments, especially the police and fire departments, and incorporate your feedback into the plan. We'll then finalize the plan for council review and adoption and submit the plan to Cal OES for approval, and then we'll update the plan every 5 years. So that concludes the presentation, and we look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Are there questions from council?
Yeah, I had a couple. So this was a federal act that set this in motion in 2000, but something changed apparently that now requires council to weigh in on it, whereas before we may have had a plan, but we weren't necessarily part of the mix in coming up with this?
I think Jeff has more background on this.
If I may, yes. To my knowledge, in 2006 and in 2011, region-wide plans were prepared, and then individual cities submitted what they characterized as annexes, but essentially each city had a small appendix to the regional plan. It was either state or federal guidelines changed with this cycle, where now each individual city is to have its own full plan, and there isn't a regional plan that we're tagging onto. And so now we are required to bring it to you for ultimate adoption.
So the draft plan that was in our package tonight, was that a previous plan or previous work? You know, one thing that was sort of made me think that as a possibility is that there's a talk about primary facilities and secondary facilities. Our new Belmont Village and Sprouts is not on the list, whereas Safeway had made it on the list in this plan.
So this is, we've used lots of different templates, so there may be some artifacts from some of these templates. It's also something that we've been working on for a while. And so, for example, we started working on this long before the Belmont Village project, not long, but months before the Belmont Village project came into operation. And for that matter, there are some more recent things that have happened internationally that are higher profile than it was when we started in terms of potential incidents. So, but that's part of what we're looking for from feedback from the council and community, are things like that where we need to edit it a little bit more. But it is intended to be a new document. It's not the 2006 or 11 version.
Okay. One other question for the moment. I noticed that sea level rise didn't make it on the top 9 list or whatever. Did I miss?
Yeah, so we've included sea level rise actually within the flooding section. So each section addresses climate change impacts, if an adaptation, if it's relevant. And for sea level rise, we characterize that as flooding. We could have it as its own section if council would be interested in having it as a standalone.
Well, without getting too much into the weeds of when is sea level rise, and when is it flooding, it seems flooding is something that happens periodically from storms, and sea level rise is more of the sea slowly rising, or you know, I'm not sure how slow it'll be, but it seems like that's something that may well affect a big chunk of Albany.
Yeah, and we have some plans. We have a draft adaptation plan that addresses sea level rise, as well as our waterfront transition plan that addresses sea level rise, so it'd be easy for us to add that as its own.
Okay.
Yeah, just one question at this time. Some of our correspondents pointed out the PG&E gas line that runs through Albany and described it as a high-pressure line. And in this document, it's not described as a high-pressure line. Do you know if that description is accurate? Is it a high-pressure line?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, it probably would be good to call that out then, I would say.
Other questions?
Yeah, sort of along that line. I know we also have a jet fuel line that goes somewhere along the railroad tracks. I think in one of the emails that we received, there was talk about, why don't we, it was difficult to figure out exactly where the high-pressure gas line is. I know from the experience, my wife's experience working on a project next to the railroad tracks in Berkeley, it's not very well mapped where that fuel line is either. So, I guess I have two thoughts. One, do we want to put that out because that might make us more prone for some kind of terrorism event? But on the other hand, do we know? Does anyone really know?
The fire department personnel absolutely know where it is and know how to manipulate the valves and so forth, and know who to call if there should be an incident.
Okay.
on both of those facilities. I know that they've gone through that training. With respect to, I think it would probably, my general answer would be we should identify its route in a general sense, but we don't want someone fooling around with either one of those.
Right.
I think it's good to know that if you live on, and I know for the PG&E gas line, it's on PG&E's webpage. It runs down Jackson and jogs over to Adams. It would be good for people to know that there is something in the street in front of them. They don't have to know exactly where it is, but people should know what's going on there.
Okay.
Rochelle, do you have questions?
No.
Oh, yeah, one more. I found the diagram I was looking for. On page 15, the page is March 15, there's and it starts on page 14 under critical facilities and infrastructure. On page 15, it cites the primary facilities, fire station, police station, et cetera, and then secondary facilities. Yeah, I think the senior housing does not appear here, nor does the, as was pointed out previously, the UC Village retail development. But I was curious why, these are all facilities, school facilities, city facilities, and then you get down to the end of the secondary facilities list, and it lists the multifamily, number of multifamily buildings, and then the single-family homes on Albany Hill. And are those listed, those are listed under critical facilities and infrastructure. Are they listed there because they're facilities at risk? Is that why they're listed there?
Yes, I believe they're, if it's including single-family homes on the Hill, it would be because they're particularly vulnerable to hazards that are addressed in the plan, but we could call that out separately.
It might be good because it just, it took me a while to figure out that's why they were included there, because all the other facilities were facilities that were providing services, and then obviously the housing provides housing, but it did stick out a little bit.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a few questions. You said that you want to get us a finished version before the end of 2017, and it was 75% done now. And just, Jeff sort of brought up an issue, and that's a sort of public knowledge that is, what is the plan to publicize finishing this, getting more comment, perhaps, letting people know, or somehow discussing for those folks over on Jackson and Adams, they have a high pressure gas line, for example. Are you going to be publicizing this in some way so people know it's time to make their final comments? Our citizens, that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did quite a few notices for this particular meeting, and encouraged people to provide comments before the meeting as well. I think you received a few, but for our final, we can come multiple times or just bring you the final if that's what you prefer, and we can definitely publicize it again. And then some of the strategies may actually address engaging particular communities on issues too.
I've got several comments or questions. I guess that's where we are. And I did submit a list of corrections, for lack of a better term, mostly related to formatting that I think you probably got today. Does the combining of ABAG and MTC change the oversight at all with this plan?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Back to page 15, where I'm just curious why the Public Works Center isn't a primary facility where they have, equipment that certainly is going to be needed. It just seems like they should be part of the primary group.
Sure.
On page 39, hang on. Oh, my question is, should we be mentioning federal institutions such as USDA?
Yeah.
Oops. Okay, and let me find that page, I'm sorry. That's related to terrorism. We're talking about targets. I hate to say this, but but should we perhaps put the stroll in there as a soft target? On page 44, talking about the seismic upgrading. I think that Preston had a good point in his email where there's three different things. There's the strategic plan, there's the general plan, and now there's this. And they don't all seem to quite fit together as to what the requirements are. And I think that I think the strategic plan is the strongest of all of those, and I think that we should probably match to that. That would seem to me to make sense. So to make it a question, can we strengthen it?
Yes, absolutely. I think that was an oversight, and Preston provided some good language for that.
And sort of going along with that, does the general plan need to be updated to include this plan as like an appendix, or is it enough the same that it's just incorporated into it?
No, they're really two different documents serving two different purposes. This is more of the general plan is more of a land use regulatory tool. This is more of a city management planning tool. I wouldn't think that you would need to go back unless something jumps out at us here where we find a real inconsistency, in which case then we might, at the next time we amend the general plan, may want to fix that.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this?
Can I ask just a brief follow-up question about facilities in Albany that are either federal, like the Western Regional Research Center, or state? I'm not sure we have any
The
state
Bond Center.
Oriented
the school, right? What's their relationship? What's our relationship with them, or do they have separate reporting requirements to FEMA that don't involve us?
I'm not familiar with that. I can check in on that, but we should include them in our own hazard mitigation planning.
And UC Village would probably be another one of those that would be. We'll look into that for you.
Okay, now public comment.
Hello, Brian Beal here, and among other things, I'm a CERT graduate, and so one of the things that came up in the CERT training was this USDA facility when they went over the hazards, and just for the benefit of the public, there are a lot of hazardous materials there that are flammable metals and so forth, so that would be a big risk. So I'm also work in information technology, and one of the things I specialize is disaster recovery. So I'm curious to see what the city's disaster recovery plan is for our information technology infrastructure. So I think that may be something that needs to be in this document. And lastly, and this pertains to the emergency preparedness meeting that Tony Thurman conducted a couple weeks ago, that the mayor and I was also there, and just three things that came out of it were one was to have a solar charger, for people to have solar chargers for their phones, and someone from AT&T explained that actually the cell phones may be operational in a disaster where the power is out, because they have new ways of dealing with this. So it's good to have a phone charger. People should have water. And portable radio was another item that was mentioned. So, and the last thing was not to call 911 to tell them there's an earthquake, because they already know. So, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Susie Barnes, and I'm also a CERT graduate and the block captain for the 900 block of Ramona. And I just wanted to address something on the hazard mitigation strategies. Are we at that point? Okay. It's the third item under the earthquake mitigation. Second item. And that is on the topic of soft story structures. I'm sorry, I just took it, this thing. Yeah. I guess I would like to put in a plug for expanding what we're doing in terms of requiring building owners of soft story structures to retrofit their structures. it's been shown that they're very liable to collapse in a strong earthquake. And I think it would really benefit the people that live in those buildings, of course, but I also think it pertains to this concept of resiliency in a few ways, and I was trying to come up with a cohesive statement of that this afternoon. And there are a few things that I would like to highlight, and that is that these buildings represent a risk of a major fire following an earthquake that could impact the surrounding neighborhood. Also, even if these buildings survive a major earthquake, they're very likely to be uninhabitable, and the people who live in them, if they get red tagged, they're going to have to move. And I think that we want these people to stay in our community after an earthquake. They're our coworkers, our customers for our business district, and we actually have quite a few of these soft-story buildings here in Albany, if you look around. And the last bit was on the economic impact involving the soft-story buildings. The buildings themselves are very expensive, but in the neighborhoods, the houses that adjoin them are also very expensive, and it would be a huge loss of wealth to the economy of Albany. Also, there may be potential costs of housing people who are temporarily kicked out of their apartment. And also, if people are saddled with their mortgage, their wealth has been eroded by this disaster, they may not be able to rebuild, and it might result in a permanent loss of the tax property base, which is based on a percentage of the property value. So, that's how I thought I would relate that back to resiliency. And I would hope that we could add that to our plan at least.
Thank you. Come on up.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you. My name is Susan Clifford, and I'm a current CERT participant, so I'm not a graduate yet. But I just wanted to share with you that I really appreciate, first of all, the transparency of the course with everything that you've said, and with the mitigation plan. There is alignment, and I think that's very important, because the people that are volunteering to be community emergency response team members need to have the confidence that what they're learning builds on all of you teachers. So I just wanted to tell you that it's working, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to council for final comments.
Yeah, now I have a question, which is, because my comment was going to be about the earthquake, that we worked on this in the strategic plan, and it didn't make it in here. But you said that was an oversight and that you've got language. Can you share that language with us? Would you send it to us? Or I don't know what is the best way for us to review that, because we did spend quite a bit of energy and thought on kind of advancing the notion of an incentive program for retrofit of the soft stories.
Yes, we'd be happy to prepare I'll work with Penelope on exactly how to get it to council, but we've given it some thought, and it's a very important element of preparedness for an earthquake. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just maybe let me make one comment briefly. I don't remember now why I did this, but I was concerned about this issue of the decline of property values after disasters. And so I contacted Oakland, because they had the fire. There's also the earthquake, which was 89, then there was the fire, which I think was 91. And it took them a little digging, but they were able to send me their old property tax results going back before and after the fire. And I just wanted it, although it's sort of, the fire didn't wipe out all of Oakland, but it wiped out a pretty expensive chunk of it up in the hills. And I wanted to see if there was a blip where the property values went down, and then as the house was rebuilt, they came back up. And I recall there being a blip, but it was not granular enough because they sent me the data for the whole city. But there is a way to get at some of the stuff if in all our spare time, right? But that's just a thought. If anyone wants to go digging through those records, they're out there. But you have to find the old COBOL programmer and wake them up, and it takes a while.
Do you have a comment?
Okay. The one comment I have kind of inspired by what Mr. Beal recommended in terms of the electrical grid is mentioned in an electrical grid failure, but we also have an information grid and cell towers, etc. I'm struck by the fact that I have a friend who has lots of family in Mexico City and Cuernavaca, and in 1985 she was unable to talk to any of her family down there, didn't get any information about what had happened to them until I think a week after the big earthquake in '85, and that was via shortwave radio. In 2017, within 5 minutes, she knew exactly where her family was and what had happened to them, just because we have now an information grid that's very responsive to these type of things. So I'm not sure how it would go in here, but I think that's something to consider in adding to things that we wouldn't want to see go down. And if there's any mitigations we can do, I think that'd be important.
Yes, absolutely. I think it would fit really well under the infrastructure failure section that we already have, and we can include it in there.
Okay, thanks.
Any comments?
Yes, so I want to thank the correspondents and the speakers tonight for all great comments. I think they're all right on. I want to support the comments about strengthening our earthquake retrofit, or bringing forth a new earthquake retrofit an ordinance with incentives and/or other methods for encouraging, especially multifamily units, to strengthen, perhaps requiring them to have a plan or something. I know that other cities, like San Francisco, actually force multifamily units to address it and to be compliant by a certain date. I don't know that we'd want to go that far, but the more we can do, the better to address this issue. I appreciate the comments about the information grid and the mitigation for the on-premise IT resources. I do think we need a section for that. Any servers or what have you that we have on premise here, we need a plan for how we would mitigate the issues caused by a disaster on those. And finally, you already got my comment about it being a high-pressure gas line, and I think the correspondent who said we should probably have a map in there in the document as well is right on, so I would encourage that as well. That's it.
Rochelle? Yep, that's. Well, I have a few comments. On page 40, on the very beginning sentence, it talks about fire hazard on Albany Hill and Albany waterfront. I'd like to see it strengthened to reflect the danger of wildfire on the homes on Albany Hill. I think that's really critical. And on page 44, which is that the grid, if possible, I'd like to see which city department is responsible for what, instead of just saying City of Albany, but put in which department. For all hazards, it says, I believe it says, encourage residents to purchase and maintain emergency supplies. Anyway, I'd like to see some language in there to reach out to our more vulnerable populations, disabled, seniors, those who have English as a second language, to include them specifically in the grid. And then on page 44, electrical grid failure is one of the matrix. I think the City of Albany should be included in there, along on the same with, is there another one there now? I guess that's it. And then on page 45, it talks about natural gas explosion. I think we should add, includes natural gas pipelines, both large and small, which run through the city, which is fairly in line with what Nick has said. For the water system failure, again, include the city of Albany as one of the, in the box on the far right. And then wildfire implement vegetation management in Albany Hill. I think we should also include the bulb in that. And Claire, I can email you all these if you want.
That would be great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, now, as I believe this was simply for review, so we don't take any action tonight, is that correct?
Can I just ask one quick question?
Sure.
And you can, if you think this is off the agendized item, you can just wave at me. I was reminded of this because every 2 or 3 years, I'm the guy who does our block list and I update the list. And we've always done it, for emergency purposes, so the emergency responders can know how many cats and dogs and people to look for in a building. But I do recall 10 or 15 years ago, there was more emphasis on outreach. I think it was in Albany. I certainly remember it in Berkeley, where someone would come to a neighborhood meeting and they would discuss earthquake safety and not putting things on high shelves that would fall off and hit you on the head. Things like that. Always keeping a pair of shoes under your bed so when all your windows break, you don't run around barefoot and cut your feet. Do we have any programs like that in Albany currently, and are they part of this process?
I know the CERT program sort of serves that purpose for CERT members who then pass on information to their neighbors, but we can add something additional about additional education opportunities for the community on hazard safety.
We had someone come to a block meeting not 15 years ago, it was 5 or 6 years ago. It wasn't Karina, but it was someone with the CERT program.
The earthquake lady.
Yeah,
I think
earthquake lady, yeah.
Okay, so do we need to do anything else on this? We're done? Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, other items, other business announcements of events, future agenda items. In my comments earlier, I was remiss in not recognizing the work that's done by the KALB staff in their support of Local Week. It wouldn't happen without them, or we wouldn't see it without them. So thank you to them also. The next City Council meeting will be on Monday, October 16th. And as I said earlier, we are adjourning in memory of those killed overnight in Las Vegas. Let us pause a moment to remember them as well as those who were injured. And with that, we are adjourned.